Hello, happy Monday. I don't know if it is. It's Monday.
That's an oxymoron, isn't it? Happy Monday.
Welcome to another broadcast we'll have a great conversation for you today. I am having some tech issues, so hopefully we'll be able to make it through the broadcast without too much trouble. Okay, I have Richard and Bill with me as usual, and we'll have a couple of guests come in to discuss the topics in chapter 4. Let's put chapter 4 up here. Our topic is, why am I always being told to check my privilege? I want to go ahead and jump in because there's a lot that I want to talk about towards the end. We're going to go off topic a little bit. Off topic meaning not directly related to what's in the book, but definitely related to how people deal with this idea of privilege in our society. So the first quote from the book is, privilege in the social justice context is an advantage or set of advantages that you have that others do not. And I wanted to go ahead and put this up here now instead of debating whether or not we know what privilege is, and start from here because this is the definition that the author throws at us in the book. Any thoughts right off the bat?
I think right off the bat, it's especially as you read this chapter, this is a difficult concept, to understand when you have privilege, and trying to break down and have those moments where you start to recognize having privilege, and that to have a privilege means that somebody else does not, or the privilege is taken away. And so I think that's an important chapter. Yeah.
The thing that strikes me as interesting, Richard, I think we may have lost Letty, but we'll just ramble on without her. It's like we have no adult supervision now. The thing that strikes me about privilege as a white guy, in case you didn't notice, I'm a white guy, is that you sort of grow up and you sort of come into your adulthood not being aware that you have it. I mean, it's sort of like if somebody asks you, well, hey, what's it like to be a white guy? You just be like, I don't know. It's just normal for me.
Yeah.
And so I think the thing that's difficult to accept for white folks, especially white men, because I think white women at least have a sense of, hey, I'm a woman and I don't have all of the advantages that men have. But as a white guy, I think the difficult, we totally went sideways while you were gone, Letty. So sorry about that. I think the thing that's difficult
I just walked down the hall to get a better signal and
there you go. As a white guy, the thing that's really difficult to accept when somebody says check your privilege is that you don't feel like anything's different because you have your own experience to draw from. Your experience as a white guy, you've always been white, you've always been a guy. So sort of race-based privilege is something that is, I think, difficult for people, especially people who have it, to sort of wrap their minds around, because it's something that's always been there. I've always been white. I've always been a guy. It's been relatively stable in my life. I don't notice anything different that I have. And so I think this is why it's so vitally important that we develop relationships in our lives that reflect the diversity of people that are out there in the world. Because if you don't have those relationships and you don't begin to empathize and understand people who come from different backgrounds, you don't have any sort of reference point for your own privilege and your own situation, because your experience is 100% of what you understand and what you know. So I know for me personally, my big shift has been very much related to my kids and my family. Not that I even come close to fully understanding my own privilege or wrapping my mind around it, or even, I'm guilty of taking it for granted all the time. It's like I said, it's my norm.
Yeah.
And so, I think my experience with my kids and with my family has helped me understand my own privilege as a point of reference. But if we stay sort of isolated in our own world, like if I only talked to white people and mostly associated myself with white men, there's no way you're going to convince me that I have any sort of privilege, because everybody I know has the same experience as me. And privilege is a relative concept. And it's a relative concept based on race. And if you don't get out of your own racial bubble and your gender bubble, in my case, then you don't have any point of reference for understanding it.
Yeah, I think I even with the author in her discussion about privilege, and she uses the example of her degree, and that it brought her some privileges, earned and unearned, and I started thinking, is privilege always such a bad thing? And then I started thinking, wait a minute. But she continues on in the book that describes that given privilege, especially unearned privilege, that you're taking something away from somebody else. And then I did, the last time we went over the book, I did sort of take that inventory of things that have gained me privilege, and started off with, tall white guy. And it took a while, but started realizing times where I got some privilege. But then I started looking at things that I normally wouldn't look at, like being a veteran. And you spend some time in the military, and you come out, and people are thanking you for your service. And there's programs that get you work, and so you can get a job. And it's a privilege that's afforded military members. People like to hire the military, and you could be a horrible employee, going into a job, but because you were in the military, people just assume, that's it, hire them. And 30 years in the military, I mean, I sort of have the right to talk about, but not every military man or women have, what it takes to be a good employee. And so they're given that privilege comes with it at the cost of somebody else getting the job. And so I weigh that in my head sometimes, because I think that, when I got hired at Bakersfield College at the Delano campus as the director, I think that being a veteran weighed heavily on the determination for my selection as an unearned privilege. And so, and I look at folks that I know apply, and I thought, why did I get that advantage? And how unfair is that? And I go back to what you were talking about last time, Bill, is you have to give up. You have to turn things down to allow people that don't have the same privileges that I have to gain some footing and move forward. And that's a hard that's a hard pill to swallow. When you worked hard, you think your whole life, and you've done these things, and then suddenly it's like questionable. Did I really earn this? And to give up, that's a difficult one.
I totally see what you're saying, but you think about it, Rich. Like the reason people like to hire military folks is that they make the assumption, right or wrong, that somebody who served in the military brings with them a certain like set of skills and values, right? Like you're disciplined and you're on time and whatever else they believe about whatever assumptions you make about somebody who served in the military.
Right.
I think when I think of like what I need to do as a leader in education about privilege and how to shift that balance, it's not really like, I'm trying to think of it not as maybe I need to sacrifice on this so that we can hire a more diverse set of employees, but rather I'm trying to think of it as, the experience that somebody brings and the skill set that somebody brings as a person of color to a position that I want to hire is a skill or an asset to that employee, because their ability to represent that perspective to our students is in and of itself valuable to their job performance.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm saying, I want to give opportunities to people of color, therefore I need to sacrifice on these, maybe I just need to lower the bar a little bit so that more people can have the opportunity. It's really like, if I flip that and I say, somebody who is a Latinx background coming to the school where I work as an employee has a certain set of skills and background and understanding and way of looking at the world that makes them more able to relate to our student population, which is 65% Latinx students. Yeah. And so they actually, that's a skill, that's an advantage. So I think part of us looking at privilege and rebalancing things so that we're not saying like, yeah, white people should get all the jobs and whatever, or it's just based on what you bring to the table at the moment that you put on a resume. It's, let's look at the whole person. Let's look at the background. Let's look at their understanding of the world. Let's look at their perspective. And even, spicy take here, maybe even the color of their skin, in that they, in that position, because I believe the representation matters. I think our students need to see people of color in leadership positions so that they can better envision themselves in leadership positions. Even the color of their skin is an asset in terms of their effectiveness in doing their job. That's how I look at it.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if there's a delay in the audio. There's a little bit of a delay in the audio. And I'm sorry, but the video seems to be working a little bit better on my end, so I hope it's not cutting out too much. But when you said the word asset, I thought of, and I'm going to bring our guest in after I say what I'm going to say right now. I thought of the interview with Meghan Markle and Oprah after they brought Prince Harry on, because he said that he was upset or confused or whatever his reaction was to the way his wife was being treated, because he saw her as an asset. to the Commonwealth. So we're going to talk about that a little bit because I think that speaks to a lot of what privilege means and the way that we talk about other people. So I'm going to bring Chrissy Norris on. She's our guest this week. Love your shirt. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Chrissy, welcome. We can move on from this specific quote and maybe talk a little bit about what's been discussed over the last few minutes, if that's okay with everyone. Do you want to jump in, Chrissy?
I'm having some technical difficulties also, so sorry if you can't hear me. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay. What are we jumping in with? What do you want me to? I'm so sorry.
Well, no, it's okay because we were talking about defining privilege. The bigger picture of defining privilege, the way that Oluo describes it in the chapter. But then as we've been having this conversation, the conversation's been really focused on your personal experiences, Richard and Bill, which is fine. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But then also, because I had this thought about the word asset, I don't know if anyone else saw the interview, but for me, the idea that someone is saying that their wife is an asset because of the color of her skin really gave me pause, and maybe it's something that we can touch on a little bit right now. Chrissy, I don't know if you saw the interview. Richard or Bill, if you want to jump in, because I know Richard and I watched it.
So just let me clarify.
Chrissy, did you watch it?
You're saying that you felt like that was maybe an objectification of her?
Yes.
Understandable.
I'm saying that. So I don't know if Chrissy, if you watched it or if you have a thought about that, because I feel like the next quote that I'm going to pull up is gonna kind of say this isn't just about race. There's all these other ways that we have privilege, but I don't know if I was the only one that felt like that's not really how we see ourselves in terms of our skin color. If we're assets, right? It feels more like an objectification. So I just wanted to bring that up because it was something that resonated when I heard it, and I wanted to bring it up again right now.
I haven't seen it. However, I think back to this because I've almost always only dated white. I had a white husband, and then him and I didn't work out, and then I had a white wife. But I've always dated white people. But we've already, I was on your show a couple of weeks ago, and we had already talked about the community that I grew up in. So that's kind of what I was always around. And so there wasn't a lot of color to really choose from. And so when you say that, I think maybe subconsciously I look at it as, I'm a person of color. Maybe if I marry or date somebody that's not a person of color, that is white, maybe subconsciously they are an asset to me because then I can move up with them and I can be like on that same level. And that's something like I don't really like to admit because, as you get, and this is when you're younger and you realize that, it's okay to be different. It's okay to be this person of color and you embrace who you are and you love who you are. But when you're young and that's all you see, you kind of fall into that. And in the chapter, she talks about how she created this group of people of color and then they're at this park and she paints this picture for you, right? And she says they're at this park and they're all eating their hummus and drinking their wine and they feel like they're doing all this good because they're all gathered together, these people of color. And then another group of people of color come up and say, hey, can we join you? What are you doing? And like the internal monologue that she has within herself that she's kind of sharing, I remember feeling like that. And I remember going, oh, but we can't interact with those people of color because they're not like my people of color. Like the Filipinos that I hung out with, we were all the same. We were all very college focused. We were all very devout Catholics. We all went to catechism. We were all these like really great students. And that's kind of who we hung out with. So we had created like this Filipino American club, but then there's like those other Filipinos where you're like, ooh, I don't know about that, you know, and you realize awful because you're creating this environment for these people of color to get together, but yet you're being selective in who you're allowing in. So that kind of resonated with me. So I think that's a lot of the reason why I felt like I needed to hang out with and I think befriend mostly white people is because I always felt like they were the ones that were going to get ahead. Even if, you know, my Filipino friends, we were the top of our class, we did really well in school, it didn't really matter because as people of color, they're not going to be looked upon the same as the white kids who were right up there with us and we were right up there with them, but it didn't matter because the color of our skin is different. So I didn't see the interview, but I want to watch it just because of that piece, but because of a lot of pieces, but that is something that I think kind of hits home.
You know that and trust me, this is coming right off of the thought just came because of Bill and the discussion there about the skin color being an asset. And what I'm thinking is, as you know, we all have different experiences. And so and we're going to use the college as an example. And so at the college, if we want to hire a more diverse faculty and to bring in more people that have experience, people of color with the experience of being people of color, then why not be able to hire people of color instead of having the whole vetting process? Because the vetting process is favoring white people. And at this point in time, we know that we're stronger as a college with a diverse faculty, especially a faculty that represents our student population, but even further down that road, to hire faculty that aren't representative of the population, that aren't white, that you know come from overseas or different areas. In that thought process, we're not allowed to have that kind of thought process. We can't hire based on experiences that relate around race and culture, because we identified that as not being a fair hiring practice.
I think it all comes down to values, right? If my value is white people are better, then if I have a Latinx candidate and a white candidate, let's pretend like this is possible, suspend your reality for a minute, that are identical in every way except race, then it comes down to my values related to race and diversity, right? So if I value the white candidate, if I say white is better, I'm going to hire the white candidate. What I'm suggesting is they're not equal. If everything, their education, let's say with the same program, same GPA, same classes, same publications, same experiences. Two candidates, one Latinx, one white. It comes down to my values related to diversity and race. And if I'm looking at my student population and it's 65% Latinx, and I'm looking at my faculty and my faculty is 85% white, and I believe that if my value says representation matters, that on some level, the racial makeup of my faculty should reflect that of my student population. Because students do better, plenty of research to show this, by the way. Students do better when there is representation, racial representation of faculty. then I'm not saying in an objectification sort of way that the faculty that's Latinx is an asset because they're Latinx. I'm saying that their racial background and their cultural background is one of their skills, is something that they bring to the job that white candidate does not bring to the job. Because my values say racial representation matters. So this candidate is better for our students in the whole scheme of things. And so to me, it's a clear hiring decision. It says representation matters, hire this one. With all other things equal, that provides that value set gives them an advantage. And I think that's the sort of mindset that we need to take on if we're talking about systems of racist systems and racist thinking. We need to begin to see the value of not just diversity for diversity's sake, but why is diversity important? Why is it important that our faculty and our leadership reflect the makeup, in my case, of our student body? But it could be in another person's case, the racial makeup of your client base or of your community. Because representation matters in terms of connection, in terms of customer support, in terms of customer feeling, in terms of relationships. Representation matters. And to me, that's like one of the ways. It's a small piece of it. It's not the answer to everything. It's a small piece of one of the things that we need to begin to look at to reverse systemic racism. Yeah. It's a slow and ugly process. And it's going to piss off a lot of white people, because who wants to give up the quality of their life? Who wants to give up the privilege that they're used to having? If you don't feel like what you have is privilege, then you feel like something vital is something that you deserve, something that you've earned is being taken away from you. And so check your privilege is right. That's the first step. You have to understand that what you have is privilege. It's not just normal. It's not average. It's not fair. It's privilege. Yeah. If you recognize something as privilege, then maybe if you're a person that actually cares about justice in the world, you'll be okay with having that taken away from you.
Well, I think if we stay on like the hiring practices and how do you to make things more equitable, then part of the argument would be, especially in higher ed, dismantling the way that system has been created in making a priority of certain things that actually really lean towards racism. So then those two candidates who are equal in every respect, those ideas about taking names off, not using photos, all of that. Like I forgot what symphony it was, where they tested this theory about putting the musicians behind a curtain so that where they were auditioning, you couldn't see who it was that was on the East Coast, I think.
No, that's a common practice with orchestras.
It was just more fair across the board. So there's a little bit about making things more equitable that way. But then, like, if you look at this privilege based on all these, additional things like physical ability, gender, class, and then the sexuality, body type, and neurological differences. What I would agree with is that how do we get there if there aren't specific ways that we're targeting specific groups of people because they have assets that white people can't have? So what's the balance? You guys are gonna figure out the answer tonight. So Make sure you come up with some good ideas.
Here's my answer. Feel free to blow me up on this. My answer is you don't put people behind a curtain. In education, especially, it matters. It matters that you're Latinx. It matters that you're a woman. I want to know that because that's part of what you bring to the table. You're not playing music that's on a sheet, right? You're interacting with our students. This is about relationships and about relatability and about sharing a common experience. And if you believe, as I do, that education and teaching and learning is a fundamentally human experience, then this idea of being colorblind is counterproductive. Because I don't want to be colorblind. You're not punching keys on a keyboard. You're interacting with people. You're making connections with our students. And as a Latina, you are fundamentally more capable of connecting with our Latinx students than I am as a white guy. I think we need to be intentional about diversity and representation. Mm-hmm. I don't think being colorblind or putting people behind a shade works in this case. I think it's counterproductive.
Right.
I mean, you're leaving it up to chance at that point. Yeah, please do.
Chrissy.
I mean, it's great as a white male to say that, and I totally get it. But I can't tell you how many times I have applied for a job, and it's all across the board, no matter what job it is, in education and customer service, that I thank God and my parents that my name is Chrissy Norris. I mean, it's Chrissy Norris, and when I present myself, when I speak on the phone, everyone has always told me, "Oh my gosh!" Once they get to know me and I'm hired, I thought you were a white woman. Mm-hmm. Your name is Chrissy Norris. You speak very well, and I thank God every time, because if my name was something else, I don't even know if I would get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
So as much as we like to think that my diversity matters and that who I am is a factor in the decision-making process for a job, especially in education, because I hear you. I think I had my first Filipino teacher in 11th grade in high school, and she was my favorite teacher because she understood what it meant to be, and she was not full Filipino. She was half Filipino, she was half white, but she understood what it meant to grow up with a Filipino dad, to grow up in a Filipino household, and that just mm-hmm. really struck with me. But she was my only one in all of high school, and then I had another Filipino instructor when I was in college. I think I could count on one hand how many Filipino teachers I've had. So, to say that representation matters, I understand that and I agree with that. Except for the fact that how do we shift that hiring process so that people who are hiring actually believe that representation within their staff, within their community, within their student population, whatever the job is, that it represents the people that are either they're interacting with, they're selling products to, they're teaching. How do we shift that and make it so that when I walk into a job that I'm not thanking God that my name is Chrissy Norris and not something else?
Oh, you're absolutely right.
You're
absolutely right. No, I'm definitely speaking about like the ideal versus what you're talking about is you're the realist, right? No, I'm definitely talking about what I want to happen and the way I think things should be. Coincidentally, my wife's name is Dominique Moseley, and she's as white can be, but doesn't have a white sounding name. But it says, so Tommy's in the waiting room. We're gonna bring him in.
Yeah, I'm gonna just real quick say that
Tommy
we're gonna
in
continue
weeks.
this exact conversation. So I'm going to bring Tommy into the room, and he can tell us a little bit about what he does and maybe why he's so dressed up. Hello,
Tucson,
good evening,
what are you
sir.
doing all dressed up like
Hello,
that?
everybody. Don't say
I
nothing,
gotta go
Bill.
change clothes. I gotta go change clothes. I'm not dressed nice.
Don't say nothing, Bill.
Making us look bad as usual. All right.
Look like
Welcome to the room.
an interview there, Tommy.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Letty?
Yes, perfect.
Am I supposed to say why I'm late?
Oh, well, I mean, you're so dressed up.
Now
I
you
thought
do.
maybe you'd like to share, why you're here to chat about this topic, and then what you were doing right before.
I think he's late because he's faculty now, and schedules don't mean anything to faculty. So
That's cool too.
Nice to have that new faculty air about me, right, Bill?
it is. You look all refreshed, honestly.
And I think that guy, and you're right, Richard McCrow, for that. So go Navy.
So, Tommy, we're talking a little bit about, the topic, check my privilege, but we were talking a little bit about the different types of privilege across the different groups that she described in the chapter. Do you have something to share maybe about your own experiences or what you see with your students or in your previous work about all of these different types of checking your privilege that we all need to do sometimes?
You know, it's interesting when you talk about privilege, because for the longest time, I thought it was just a norm. I didn't realize that being Black, I had any privileges. I thought I was just a regular person. Till as I got older, I noticed that different people were treated differently. And that was what was later defined as and came to be known as a privilege. For me, I had just always kind of struggled with having to I chose law enforcement and the military as a career. And those are pretty good organizations as far as, privilege. And in the military, and Rich will tell you, the privilege was based on rank more than it was your color. And in the police department, it ended up being the same thing. It was more your rank than your color, except between colleagues. Between colleagues, I did run into a little bit of that privilege, and mostly from my white friends and white colleagues is where I saw them feeling that they were entitled where I wasn't entitled. And I always felt I had to work twice as hard to get ahead. And reading what she said in the chapter about being bougie, most of us in the Black community have known what being bougie is from a long time ago, and it's not a new statement. And some of us can lift our head up if we're called bougie, and others will defend the fact that I am not bougie. I'm from the streets too. Don't mess with me and call me bougie, because that's kind of fighting words as well.
I'm gonna kind of speed through the next, not speed through it, but I want to put this up because I wanted to make sure that this was sort of the overarching theme, maybe. Because even within our own cultural communities, this can be an issue, like you're saying. Are there names that we call each other? Are there abilities or hair type or languages that also create these different tiers of privilege within each cultural group, that make it even harder for us to fight against the privilege that exists outside our own groups? Richard and Bill, I know that a lot of your experiences with higher ed, and I think that you probably see that a lot. And if you're not paying attention to the student experience, maybe that's another place to really start looking at, where that's lacking for them.
Quick comment? Can I make a quick comment before Rich and Bill? I heard earlier about Lynn said, and I love what she said about the culture. I did a news broadcast a couple days ago about Atlanta and the killings. And I came out in solidarity. I know Rich knows about this in the college about, to stop the Asian hate. And I know that, we understand as African Americans what it means like to be hated by the way you look and how you do it. So I just heard it wholeheartedly. And I did a national broadcast on that. And the reason I'm in a tie, Bill and Rich, is I just did another TV interview for the Colorado shootings, and I gave a description of that. Thank you, Letty.
Wow, that's right. There was a shooting right before we went on the air. Since we're talking about that and we have about 20 minutes left, I did want to have this conversation about this topic. I had prepared this ahead of time because we're talking about privilege, and just because the law enforcement response kind of took it in that direction. So I don't know if anyone wants to just say a couple of things. I feel like we don't say the right things when we feel certain feelings when these things happen. It's like the same conversation over and over again about the same kind of violence against groups of people who are not white. If maybe you want to share a little bit about what's happening at your college, if there was a statement, if there were conversations, if anyone's talking about it, is this something that is on everyone's at the forefront of any conversations in your spaces right now? Anyone can jump in. Chrissy also.
I really have nothing to say except it's embarrassing to be a white guy right now. I mean, honestly, if the fact that somebody had the audacity to suggest that, what this gentleman did was within the realm of acceptable actions because he was having a hard day. Come on. Speaking of privilege, right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm having a hard day. Let me kill some people. Come on. I mean, that's just insane.
Chrissy and I have been having this conversation for almost a week now. So since it happened,
I have nothing to say that's intelligent or just not angry words. Honestly, I just can't. I can't even. Just get yourself together.
I don't. I mean,
when I did the interview, and
Chrissy.
Oh, okay. I'm not surprised because hate crimes happen all the time, and people are always targeting certain groups, and not that we come to expect it, but that's just what's been happening for so long. I'm just constantly appalled by how law enforcement dismisses this behavior because of who the person creating the act of violence was. And that to me is always like the shock. And I know that it probably should no longer be the shock because it just happens continuously, but to dismiss it that he was just having a bad day. And there's all these memes that come out and like, what do you do when you have a bad day? I binge watch Netflix. I drink, I go to a bar with friends, and I don't sit here and shoot people. It's like, how does this keep happening? And how does law enforcement just continuously get away with it? That's to me what I think is the most, it continues to be the hardest thing to kind of swallow, because you're raised to believe, yes, and you're raised to believe that they're supposed to protect you. They're here to, make sure that you're safe. And then when things like this happen and you're only visibly protecting the white guy, the white person, all these other races are left to feel super vulnerable and fearful to just even leave the house. And that to me is just the most unsettling part of it. It's a tragedy of what happened, but just a constant dismissal of these people's behavior because they're white and and we're dismissing it as a bad day is just, it's disgusting.
Agree. My 16-year-old son.
What?
Go ahead, Tommy.
Rich.
Tommy's next. I don't want to jump in.
No, Rich, go ahead.
I think, this guy, along with the assault on the Capitol, just constantly that the desire to forgive white people, and there is, and I can't remember the senator's name, but just saying out loud, I had no fear during the Capitol when they assaulted the Capitol, no fear at all. Now, if that was Black Lives Matter, folks, I would have been, and not understanding what he's saying. And I'm sort of with Bill now. I don't have anything really good to say because, and it's embarrassing how white people are dealing in these environments.
Well,
I want Tommy to say
as a law enforcement officer.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. There's a little bit of a delay. So Tommy, go ahead and I'll save my comment.
Okay. Christy, as a law enforcement officer, a lot of times what we do is we gather the facts. Number one fact to think about is I talk to my class about this. We do current events in my criminal justice classes, and the first thing I said to my students was, well, talk to me about what happened in Atlanta. So a couple of the students said, well, he was going to different massage parlors. And I go, okay. And I wanted to hear how they're going to take this too far, if they were going to categorize it or classify it because of who works at massage parlors. When the shootings happened, they never mentioned who the shooter was. I knew instinctively who the shooter was. And they said that because they didn't want to turn it up. Some of my students will know it's because he didn't get a happy ending and he had, did his act. That's dismissive because we kind of all know what was going on in his mind. And number three, it happened in Georgia. So that was a real clue that the atmosphere was very tense. And when you do investigations, you're doing that, but they really should have released that information a lot sooner than they did release the information because they knew what was going to be said. And now we know why he targeted those locations, regardless if he didn't get a happy ending or not. I think that, in this kind of thing, I know a lot of times as blacks, we were scared to go outside in the 60s and 70s back in that day because we know that we'd be a target. We have a conversation with our kids today. Every black parent has a conversation with their black child, and who else has, all people of color are starting to have that conversation with their young kids so that they don't end up in trouble. And it's not about being one of the greatest comments I've heard recently was by Rich McCrow. And Rich McCrow says we are, and we should understand about being uncomfortable, and we should have these uncomfortable conversations. For the longest time, we never had those conversations. Now we're having them. And I think it's well about time. Yeah,
Absolutely. My 16-year-old son got his driver's license today. On the way home, in the middle of celebrating, for the umpteenth time, I'm having the talk with him, right? Because he's Latino. I'm saying, okay, you got your license. If you get pulled over, you can't get an attitude. You gotta keep your hands on the steering wheel. You gotta be respectful and be quiet. And did I have that conversation with my white son? Nope, I did not. Have I ever been concerned when I've been pulled over? Which has been a lot. Because I like to go fast. Sorry, Tommy. I'd hate to disappoint you like that, but it's true. I've never been concerned. And you know what? I I've broken all the rules. I remember the first time I was pulled over by a cop. I was digging around the glove compartment, freaking out. Like, I was stressed just like any other 16 or 17-year-old kid would be. But I did all the stupid things. If I had been black or brown, who knows what would have happened. But it gets really, really real when you're a parent and you have that talk with your kids. It gets really real. And absolutely, I absolutely do not understand what it's like to be black or brown. But I have had that talk. And I'm literally.
And Bill, I'll tell you, I got pulled over. I got pulled over as a cop. I was on duty as a detective working a undercover operation, and you should have heard the language said to me until they realized, well, let me see your ID. I says, I'm not reaching into my pocket. I'm not reaching under the seat. And as soon as they heard the word cop out of my mouth, the guns were lowered. They apologized to me. And I'm thinking all those racial comments that they made to me, they couldn't take those back. So they were very apologetic, hoping I wouldn't file a complaint. And I was a cop getting over.
But what if you had been a 16-year-old
I want to
kid?
share that my son is almost 16, and when he started high school and started playing sports, and we started talking about what could happen, if he's in a car with somebody. My son looks white, okay? He's light-skinned, he has blue eyes, so he looks white. He's half white. But my conversation with him was, this is what happens if you are in the car. This is your responsibility too. You don't act a certain way. You be supportive. You follow the rules. You get your phone out and start recording. Like, I feel like if we're not also taking the responsibility to educate all the different colored kids, then we're still perpetuating the idea that it's the responsibility of the kids who are of color, who look like they are black and brown kids, to always only be the ones that have to consider that. And it's not fair. And it is something that I wanted to change for my child. Be aware, be ready to support. Right. And that's, maybe it's hard for some people to hear me say that, who are saying, why are you putting your kid in danger? It's like, if he's in a car with a friend who is a black or brown child, he is also gonna be in danger because of who he's hanging out with. That's not fair to anybody. It's not right. Those cops shouldn't be pulling them over if they're just kids, driving down the street who happen to be the wrong color. So if we're not ready to really say we're all in this together as adults, our kids are growing up having that example. So I'm ready to say that to him. And he's heard it, and he's like, I know. And, we watch the news together, and we watch these movies together, and we listen to podcasts together. So he's aware. I can't pretend like that's not also his reality.
That's a good privilege challenge. That's a good concept.
I challenge you.
Well, yeah, because you often do sit back and say, well, God, if I don't even recognize my privilege, how do I challenge it? And what do I do? And I think that is one area that we talk, whenever we talk about white privilege, we often talk about the interaction that folks have with police officers, and the interaction with people of color compared to people, white people, and that interaction, and yeah, you're right. Teaching your kids the similar lesson, and I don't know. I don't. That's fascinating. That's a good conversation.
Oh, he's heard it. It wasn't easy. That wasn't easy.
Yeah.
I do. Does anyone have any comments on this particular? I don't want to veer away from what happened in Atlanta because I'm going to share a little video. But this statement, I wanted to make sure that we really looked at it, talked about it, kind of sat with how uncomfortable it is, how painful it is for people. While on, like Chrissy was saying, it's one thing to have some ignorance and say the wrong words, but then there are no consequences. Because the way that this person was talked about really dismissed him as just someone who was having a bad day, and completely erased the 8 lives that were lost and the families that are now being affected. Anyone have a last word on this before I share a little clip I have?
I have a word, but I'm gonna defer it to Tommy.
With your son.
What was that, Tommy?
Letty, I like what you did with your son, and I like what you did with your son, and I compliment you because my grandkids very liked it. And look at them, you got to look at them close to tell that they're mixed with black. But so it doesn't matter if they're in the car, and he's going to be in the car, and he looks white. Mm-hmm. He's going to be in the car, and he's going to get jammed up. So it's great that you did what you did. I just want to compliment you on that because of the blue eyes and the skin, it doesn't matter if he's with somebody else who isn't.
Yeah. Right. Thanks. Bill, your one word.
Agree. I can't sum all that up in one word. I can't compete with Tommy Tucson. He's just too sharp with his suit. It's very intimidating. Look, I think it comes down. I think privilege for white people comes down to 2 things, right? I think it's values and expectations. It's what you value and what you expect. And when we say the young straight white man has a bad day and that's why he shot 8 people or killed 8 people, it comes down to your expectations. And as a white dude, oftentimes our expectation is that we can show up in a pretty mediocre way to rob a word from Ijeoma Oluo one more time. We can put out a mediocre performance and still get the best of the best in treatment. And so when I have a bad day, maybe I go shoot some people. That's because my expectation is that I should never have a bad day because I'm white and I'm a guy. I think that's the world we live in, and to shift that expectation and that value, it is not going to be easy, and it is not going to be pretty, and we're going to have a lot of people having a lot of bad days between here and there, but that's the way through. I mean, if we're seriously interested in having a world where privilege is evenly distributed, right? That's what we're talking about. Racial justice is the equal distribution of privilege. Then you got to take it from me and give it to somebody else. And if I'm a white dude who just thinks what I have is normal, then you're asking me to be less than normal. You're asking me to accept a standard that's lower than what I've been raised to expect. But that's it. Because for somebody else to have a standard higher than you expect, that's what we got to do. I'll shut up, Bill.
I was just going to say, we're going to share your address so people can come talk to you about the things
burn down my house. That's perfect. I fully expect that to happen. I really should have.
Bill's giving up privilege, guys. He's handing it out.
It's great. Just so you all know, I'm thoroughly mediocre. So privilege is all I have. I don't have any actual skills.
I want to share this Asian American Journalists Association at aaja.org. This has also been a kind of a side conversation. Well, it's not a side conversation in the things that I'm reading, because I'm really inundated with this stuff a lot, because I put myself in there because I really want to know. And there's a lot of conversation about not naming the victims because journalists, they don't want to learn how to say the names, or they're embarrassed, or they don't want to try for whatever reason, because they're not used to saying Asian names. And how many of us are? My friend Chrissy Norris. Your name is easy to say, but we don't go out of our way to learn. We don't try. Thank your parents. And so I wanted to show this video because what this organization did is they recorded a couple of the journalists who are members of this association pronouncing the names, the 6 names of the victims who are Asian and have Asian names. They're not Americanized names. They don't go by any Americanized names. And I downloaded the video, and it's not that long, but I wanted to show it so that we could hear the names, and anyone who watches this video can hear the names and just, pay some real respect. So just a couple minutes.
Soon Jung Park, Soon Jung Park, Hyun Jung Grant, Hyun Jung Grant, Soon Ja Kim, Soon Ja Kim, Young E Yu, Young E Yu,
Xiaojie Tan, Xiaojie Tan, Dao You Feng, Dao You Feng.
Not easy to say.
Letty, would you send that to me, please?
Sure.
I
got that from this.
Delays.
Oh, yeah, please send it to me. I have a presentation tomorrow, and one of the slides does with mispronunciation of names.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will. I downloaded it, so I can share with all of you. Chrissy, what were you going to say?
I taught ESL at a language school here in downtown San Diego, and it was a school where people from all over the world would come to it's basically study abroad. They'd come here to San Diego and kind of just be immersed in the language, and they lived here for however long they could live here for. And a lot of the students that I had were from Korea. I had a couple from China, a couple from Japan, and all of them came here, and they had Americanized names. And as a Filipino, granted that my name is Chrissy Norris, and they all knew that, I really wanted them to embrace the fact that they have these names that they were given, and that in my classroom that they should feel safe enough to be able to introduce themselves as whatever their name was. Because they always introduce themselves as, "Hi, I'm Kathy Park," or whatever they decided that their Americanized name was going to be. And I said, I kind of always prefaced it with, "Thank you for introducing yourself. What is what was your birth name?" And they really appreciated that. And I had a couple of students tell me that they appreciated that, because even if our class only met for 50 minutes once a week, they knew that in that class, in that space, that they could be who they were. It's hard sometimes to pronounce the names, but I always try to take it to that place of like, I want to learn who you are. And that's the first step, right? Is pronouncing somebody's name correctly and being able to at least try. And even if you get it wrong 5 times, you're going to always try, because that's who they are. That name is their identity. It's part of who they are. And I think that's the least we can do as an educator is understand what their name is, how to pronounce it. Who are these people coming into our classroom? So thank you for sharing that video. I liked it.
it's true across the board because this happens at work. Yes, it happens in the classroom. Oh my gosh, to kids everywhere all the time. Even when teachers are corrected, it keeps happening. It happens in workplaces. My name's been butchered, and even after being corrected, people are like, "It's just easier if I say it this way." And I'm like, "Dude,
no, that's not my name."
To my dad. What's that?
They're like, "No, that's not my name, so that's not how you're gonna say it."
Yeah. So we'll talk a lot about this when we get to the chapter on the model minority, which is, where a lot of Asian people get lumped because in terms of English and Chinese or Korean or Japanese or any other Asian language, it's more difficult for, monolingual English only speaking people to wrap their mouths around these words, but they don't make an effort. So we'll talk about that on the model minority, but that's a lot of that conversation that what you're talking about changing names and sort of losing some kind of an identity, and you have to become someone else to be accepted into American culture, be assimilated. So we'll dive into that later, but I wanted to share the video because it just seemed like I kept reading that the names weren't being pronounced during any of the news about the tragedies that they're a part of. And so I wanted to share the website and share the video. So you can check, I think it's a nonprofit. You can support this organization as well. That I didn't. I was going to try to go and find a bunch of, but a bunch of different things to put up here for people to donate and share. But I feel like do the work, people. Go find these organizations. There is one thing that I will share. It's a GoFundMe page, and it has all of the different GoFundMe campaigns that have been started. Like the one for the two boys, I think is almost at $3 million. But if you look at some of the other ones, they're at like 20,000 or a couple at around 100,000. But I wanted to share it because it's also, if you just Google it, you will find it. So if you really feel like you can't do anything else except share some of your hard-earned cash, white people, then definitely go to this page. Let's see if I can share it here.
It's a good start.
I'm so rude. I am. I'm so rude. Okay. I thought I was better at this. Okay, so can you see that? It's the GoFundMe page.
Yes.
Okay, so I just went in and said GoFundMe Atlanta victims, I think is what I Googled. And then this page comes up. And so you can find other organizations like nationwide, but these are specific to these victims. And so you can see, like, here's the boys, it's almost $3 million for them. But then the other accounts are up here on this page, easy to find, easy to donate. So if you can, just Google these GoFundMe pages and donate to this cause. I do want to say also that, sorry guys, I got lost. I'm back. That there are also people in our lives who are, putting their creativity to work when it comes to this. And Chrissy is one. She's an owner of Canva Designs, and she is crafting, and she'll make shirts and all these other things. And I don't want this to sound like we're doing a hustle or whatever, but the shirt that she's wearing is something that we're promoting right now. I'm helping her promote this one, and she has another one. Then we can, if you go to her Facebook page or her Instagram page at Canva Designs, you'll find she's selling these, and I'm helping her promote it. And then 20% of the proceeds will go to Asian American Feminist. Is that? Sorry, I didn't put it down.
Yes, AsianAmericanFeminism.org.
That sounds
Not
awesome.
enough
But do you have
to
a
do power.
non-tank top? Because I don't have the gun show that you've got going on there.
I do have t-shirts, sweatshirts.
Good to know.
Yeah, I just happened to go to the gym before, so I decided to wear this to the gym today. So.
Obviously.
Chrissy, do you have an email that we can ask for so we can order shirts?
Yes, I can have Leti give you the link, or I can share the link when she shares the video. But yes, there's a link where I have an order form.
Good. I'd love to get a few.
Leti, how come you didn't have that queued up and ready to go?
I messed up today. Hang on, I'm typing it right now.
You're supposed to be able to predict everything we say and have that on a slide that's ready to go.
There.
Look at
so
that.
Facebook,
There you go.
Instagram.
All right.
Go to this and help us donate some proceeds to Asian American feminists.
Tommy's got his old school fountain pen out there writing it down.
Why are you messing
He's like,
with me, Bill?
what is this Facebook?
What is this?
Tommy, I haven't seen you in so long. It's just been sort of storing up.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Okay.
We miss you.
We can gush over Tommy in a second. I want to wrap this up because I don't want to go much longer because we're after 8 o'clock now, and I don't want to be on too long. Even though this topic, I know every week we feel like we can probably keep having a conversation. So thank you to everyone who is watching this video. If you want to catch up with us next week, our topic will be intersectionality. So chapter 5, and so you want to talk about race. What is intersectionality and why do I need it? And we will have Tommy back. Is that right? Next week?
Yes, and I won't do any news interviews next week.
So we will have to worry about your tardiness next week. But you have to wear a suit, like we already did. We voted. You have to wear a suit next week.
Oh yeah. I like seeing Tommy dressed
right.
up.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We will catch up with you next week.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Bye.